Thanks for listening to this audio podcast from Crossgate Church in Hot Springs, Arkansas. We invite you to visit us at crossgate.org. It is our hope that you will hear from God and draw closer to Him through this service.
Have you ever had an expectation that wasn't met and you were just kind of disappointed? Or maybe something that, man, you were so sure that this thing was gonna happen and it didn't work out. And as a result, you were just you were kind of bummed. Maybe it even made you question everything. We've had several moments like that in our family, but a few years ago, we had a situation kind of like that. And I was managing a Lifeway Christian bookstore here in town and really enjoyed it. And we got this opportunity to consider moving our family right outside of Nashville, Tennessee, to manage one of the corporate flagship stores there. And to be honest with you, we were perfectly content here in Hot Springs and at Crossgate, but as we prayed about that, man, God began to stir in our hearts to say, give this some serious consideration. And so as we prayed and sought counsel, we really believed that God was leading us to make this move. And so by faith in 2018, we packed up all of our stuff and we moved right outside of Nashville where we knew no one, right? It was a brand new chapter, a brand new season, but we were excited. We were anticipating something big from God because we believed He led us to do this. Now, I don't know if you know this, but Nashville, Tennessee is a little bit different than Hot Springs, Arkansas. And so it was taking us a while to kind of get settled and used to life there in that big city area. And just as we were kind of getting settled, Lifeway made the announcement that they were going to close all of their retail stores. And man, that was a shock for our family. It kind of sent us into this tailspin of like, what is going on? And to be honest, we were disappointed. We were confused, maybe even a little frustrated, right? Now, we really did believe that God led us to make this move. And so we wrestled with God, why would you lead us to do this just to close the door? We were thousands of miles from friends and family, maybe hundreds. That's a little bit of exaggeration. Felt like thousands of miles. But we were like, God, what are you doing? And we wrestled with that for months as I worked to close out my time with Lifeway. And just as my store closed, I got another job opportunity in the area. And we were like, okay, this is from God, right? It's God's provision. And that was in January of 2020 when I started that new job. And just a few weeks later, I don't need to tell you what happened. The world shut down. And as a result of that, I lost that job. Now listen, we had just signed a new lease. It was expensive living outside of Nashville, and we did not know how we were gonna make it. I didn't know how we were gonna make the rent. I didn't even know if we could provide food for our family. God, what are you doing? Why would you lead us to this place? Can I be honest with you? It was really hard. But looking back on it now, it was also really sweet. Because in those moments of difficulty, in that season, we got to see the faithfulness of God. Because listen to me, every time we had a need, He met it. Every time we didn't know what we were gonna do, God said, I got this. And He met those needs in ways that we could have not even imagined. You wanna know the most incredible part of the story? Is God used all of that disappointment and doubt and frustration in a really difficult season to bring us back here to Hot Springs. And I would not be standing here today had we not gone through that season. And so looking back, man, I am so thankful. Listen, it's not what we expected, but it was exactly what we needed. And so today, as we continue our series called Seek, we're gonna see from the life of Martha and Mary and Lazarus how a lot of times our expectations don't always line up with God's plans. And when that happens, we can experience disappointment or frustration, confusion, maybe even a little bit of anger or doubt. But what we're going to see today is just like Mary and Martha learned, we can seek God even through our tears. And when we do, we'll find that, hey, he loves us and that his plans for us are better than we could even imagine. So turn with me to the Gospel of John, chapter 11. John chapter 11. We're going to cover a lot of verses today, but we're going to break it up. So I need you to stay with me, okay? You guys good? You with me? All right, you awake? Here we go. John chapter 11, starting in verse 1, the word of the Lord says, "Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, saying, 'Lord, he whom you love is ill.' But when Jesus heard it, he said, 'This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it.' Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, 'Let us go to Judea again.' The disciples said to him, 'Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you. Are you going there again?' Jesus answered, 'Are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him.' After saying these things, he said to them, 'Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him.' The disciples said to him, 'Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover.' Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he meant taking rest and sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, 'Lazarus has died, and for your sake I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him.' So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, 'Let us also go, that we may die with him.'" So here, John introduces us to Mary, Martha, and their brother Lazarus. And apparently, this family had a very special connection with Jesus. It's not the first time we've seen them. If you remember back in Luke chapter 10, Jesus goes and stays at their house, right? This is the scene where Martha is busy preparing the meal and getting the house ready, and Mary is sitting at Jesus' feet, right? But apparently, they had a very special connection with Jesus. And so John, in fact, tells us that this Mary is the same Mary who would later anoint Jesus with oil and wipe his feet with her hair. They loved Jesus, and listen, Jesus loved them. But now Lazarus is sick, and it's serious, right? It's serious enough that Mary and Martha get together, and they're like, "Listen, we got to make a plan. Like, we have to do something, or Lazarus is going to die." They must have thought, all we need to do is get Jesus here. Like, if we can get Jesus here, he can heal Lazarus, and surely Lazarus will not die. So they hatch this plan, and they send a message to Jesus saying, "Jesus, we have this need." And that brings us to our first point. Seek God in the moment of your need. Seek God in your moment of need. Mary and Martha were absolutely right to seek Jesus in their moment of need. And we know that what happened, or listen, we don't know what happened before they made this decision. Like, how long was Lazarus sick? Did they try other things? Did they call for doctors, medicines? We don't know any of that. But what we do know is that it was serious and they were desperate. So desperate, in fact, that they sent a messenger with a message to Jesus, and it would have been at least a day's journey one way to get from Bethany to where Jesus was. They were desperate, so they said, you got to go take this message to Jesus. And I want you to tell him, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." You see, Mary and Martha, they were confident that Jesus would show up, that he would come and heal Lazarus. Why? Because they really believed that he loved Lazarus and he loved their family. That's why it says this, "He whom you love is ill." This is not just a random person. It's someone you love and care about, right? So they make this plan to get the message to Jesus. And what was Jesus' response? Notice he says in verse 4, Jesus says, this illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. And so you have to imagine the scene there. Like the people that are standing around, the disciples, maybe even the messenger, they hear this word from Bethany that Lazarus is seriously sick. And then they hear Jesus' response. Well, this illness doesn't lead to death. And so they were probably like, oh, well, good. Like, that's good news, right? So he's going to recover. He's not going to die. And what was that he said about being glorified and the Son of Man and all that? Well, obviously, Jesus is going to heal Lazarus, right? And listen, if we're being honest, that's probably the conclusion that we would make too, right? He's sick. Jesus said it doesn't lead to death, so Jesus is going to heal him. That's natural to assume. But here's the thing, Jesus was not concerned with doing the natural. He was planning something supernatural that they could not even see. And then the story takes a little bit of a strange twist, doesn't it? Because John tells us that Jesus did, in fact, love Mary and Martha and Lazarus. And then he says, because he loved them so much, he stayed 2 more days where he was. And in that time, Lazarus died. Like what? Didn't John just get done saying that Jesus loved them? And didn't Jesus say that this illness doesn't lead to death? Like, how do those two things match up with his actions here? Like, they had asked him to come and heal Lazarus, and then it says because he loved them, he didn't do it. If we're being honest, that scenario, if I'm Mary and Martha, that doesn't feel very loving, does it? It's like I asked you for something, and you did the exact opposite. Have you ever been there where you feel like God, like I asked God for something, maybe even begged him for something, but instead it seems like he did the exact opposite of what I'd asked? Listen, I know I've been there, right? I've been there. And in those moments, it could be very easy for us to think, well, maybe he doesn't hear us. Like maybe he didn't get the message. Or maybe he did, and he just doesn't care. Does he really love us? But listen, this passage is a great reminder that while we should certainly seek Jesus in our moment of need, we have to understand and remember that he is God and we are not. We don't always understand his purposes. When he does things that we're like, I have no idea what you're doing, that's okay. He's God and I'm not. In fact, God said this very thing in Isaiah chapter 55, 8 and 9. Look at what it says. It says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. His ways aren't our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. One other thing we should take from this passage, though, is realizing that even though we might not immediately understand God's purposes, we can be confident, one, that he loves us. Okay? God does love us. There's a reason why it specifically says Jesus loved them. He does love us. And then number 2, he is actively working all things for his glory and for our good. He says, hey, this is for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified through it. Tim Keller says this about the way that God often answers our prayers. He says, God will only give you what you would have asked for if you knew everything he knows. Like when we pray and we ask God for things, he says he will only give us what we would have asked for if we understood all of his purposes, if we understood his thoughts, if we understood his plans. In other words, God is so good. He is so loving. He is so kind that he doesn't always give us what we ask for. Instead, he gives us what he knows we really need. And friends, in that way, God gets the glory. He gets the glory. And so in the passage, we see that Jesus delays going to Mary and Martha, and Lazarus dies. And then Jesus says, okay, guys, it's time to go back to Judea. And of course, the disciples, man, they're not very excited about that because they just left there. And when they left, the Jews had stones and were trying to kill him, right? So they're like, Jesus, are you sure you want to do this? And Jesus says, yes, I'm sure. And then he says, we got to go back because Lazarus is asleep. Hopefully that's not any of y'all this morning. He says, Lazarus is asleep and I got to go wake him up. And man, I love the disciples' response because they're a lot like me. Like they're kind of dense at times because they're like, what? Jesus, if Lazarus is sleeping, he's going to wake up. Like he'll eventually wake up on his own if he's asleep. Why do you have to go and risk all of our lives just to wake him up? Like send a messenger, he'll wake up. And so it says that Jesus had to kind of dumb it down for him, didn't he? He had to kind of bring it down on their level. And he says this in verse 14. He says, then Jesus told them plainly, right? That's the Keith version. Lazarus has died. And then they're like, oh, okay. And then he says something that is just a little odd, isn't it? He says, Lazarus has died. And then he says, and for your sake, I'm glad that I was not there. Why? So that you may believe. Now that changes things a little bit, doesn't it? Because it's not just like Jesus was delayed and some things came up and he couldn't make it. He's like, no. I'm glad that I wasn't there to heal him. Like, why in the world would he say that? Mary and Martha are over here suffering. How could he be glad that he wasn't there? And there's a truth here that we need to learn, and that's this. Many times, God's plans for our lives include purposes and people that we cannot immediately see. Right? You know that Mary and Martha were in Bethany and they were grieving. They were hurting. They were confused. They were disappointed. But this gives us an insight that God's plans are not always just about us. That it includes purposes and people that we can't see. We don't know everything that he's up to. So yes, we should seek God in our moment of need, but we have to remember that he doesn't always do exactly what we ask him to do, the way that we want him to do it, and in the timeline that we give him. But we can trust that even when he doesn't meet our expectations, he does hear us, he does love us, and he is working on our behalf. Number 2, seek God in the midst of your disappointment. Seek God in the midst of your disappointment. Look at verse 17. It says, now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And she said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. So Jesus and the disciples, they travel to Bethany, and when they arrive, Lazarus has been in the tomb for 4 days. And many of the Jews have gathered to try to console Mary and Martha and to grieve Lazarus' death. And so you can probably imagine the scene when they're all in the house grieving and probably eating, a bunch of food like we do, and they're just being together, and somebody busts through the door and says, Jesus is coming down the road. Like it's a real life spotting. Jesus is coming. And so verse 20 tells us that Martha gets up and man, she goes out to meet Jesus. But it says that Mary remains seated in the house. And we'll get to Mary in a minute, but I want to focus here on Martha's response. Martha goes out to meet Jesus and she cuts him off before he even enters the village. And she says to him immediately, Lord, if you would have been here, my brother would not have died. Now, the scriptures don't give us any indication of her demeanor or her tone or what she was feeling in that moment, but as we read that, you can almost feel the frustration and disappointment, can't you? Like, if you had only been here. You see, Mary and Martha, they wanted Jesus to come and fix their problem, fix Lazarus, heal him so that he won't die, but he didn't show up in time. Like, he was late. And Martha doesn't mind telling Jesus. She's being very honest in expressing her disappointment. If you would have only been here. You see, disappointment comes from unmet expectations, doesn't it? It's like I expected something to happen, and it didn't happen, and so now I'm disappointed. And surely Mary and Martha, they had this expectation of Jesus. They fully believed that he would show up and heal Lazarus. Why? Because they really believed that he loved them. And when he didn't meet that expectation, she was disappointed. Maybe she was even a little frustrated. Have you ever been disappointed with God? Can we be honest this morning? Listen, I have. I've been there. I mean, is that okay to say in church? Like, is it okay to admit that sometimes we were disappointed with God or confused or like, God, you didn't meet my expectations? Yes, it's okay to admit that in church. Because, listen, this is really important. When those moments of unmet expectations or disappointment or frustration or even anger, when they arise in our lives, we have a very important choice with what we're going to do with that. Because the enemy wants us to say, you know what, I'm just going to move on. I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to put that aside. I'm just going to keep doing what I've always been doing. But those kind of things, it's like a wound. And when we don't take care of that wound and we just ignore it, pretend like it's not there, it'll eventually go away, right? No. The thing can get infected, right? And before you know it, this root of bitterness can happen in our hearts where we start to distance ourselves from God. And we start to become bitter towards God, and maybe we'll start to question if he does hear us, or if he does really care, or if he's even powerful enough to answer our prayers. Maybe we may even get to the place where we question, does he even really exist? That's one thing we can do. Or we can be like Martha, and we can take those disappointments to God honestly. We can take those feelings and emotions, and we can be honest with God, just like Martha did with Jesus in sharing her struggle. Yet you see that even in the midst of her disappointment, Martha did not lose faith. She says, Jesus, I'm feeling let down because if you just would have been here, he would not have died. But she says, even now, even in the midst of my disappointment, I believe that the Father will give you whatever you ask. So yes, she probably did come across a little strong, but she also came in faith. And I want you to notice Jesus' response here, because he doesn't rebuke Martha, he doesn't criticize her. Instead, he assures her, the first thing out of his mouth, he says, your brother will rise again. And at first she doesn't understand though, does she? She's like, yeah, Jesus, I get that. Right? She thinks Jesus is trying to give her like an Old Testament Sunday school lesson. She's like, yes, I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Like, I've heard that. I've been taught that. And if that were the case, it would almost be like Jesus was doing what we sometimes do, and that's, somebody loses a loved one and we want to try to make it better, and so we'll say like, well, don't worry, they're in a better place, right? And while that may be true, it's not really helpful in that moment. But that's not what Jesus is doing here at all. You see, in verse 25, Jesus really flips the narrative. Look at what he says to her. He says, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. And listen, then Jesus asked Martha the most important question he could ever ask. Do you believe this? He says, here's the truth about who I am. Do you believe this? And I want you to notice something about this interaction. The conversation shifts from what Jesus can do to who he really is, right? It goes from his ability, like can he raise Lazarus from the dead? It goes from ability to identity. He says, because it's not about what I can and can't do for you. It's about who I am and whether or not you believe that. You see, Martha wanted Jesus to fix her problem. And Jesus said, I'm not interested in that. I've got bigger goals than that. Instead of just fixing your problem, I want to grow your faith. So he says, do you believe that I am the resurrection and the life? And Martha responds with, yes, Lord. Even though I'm hurting, even though I'm disappointed, I do believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God who is coming into the world. Church, the most important decision that you and I will ever make in this life is around who Jesus is, right? Was he just a good man? Was he just a moral teacher, a fictional character? Or was he indeed, is he the Son of God? God incarnate, the Messiah, the Savior of the world, the resurrection and the life. He said, I am the resurrection and the life. Do you believe this? Listen, God is big enough to handle your disappointment. He's big enough to handle your confusion, all of the emotions. He says, bring them to me. Bring them. We got to remember that in the midst of all of that, he wants to do more than just fix our problems. He loves us. He wants to reveal more of himself to us, and he wants to use those opportunities to grow our faith. So it brings us to number 3, seek God in the middle of your brokenness. Seek God in the middle of your brokenness. Look at verse 28. It says, when Martha had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. Some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? So after Martha's interaction with Jesus, she goes back to the house to get Mary. Now, if you remember, verse 20 said that when Martha went out to meet Jesus, Mary remained seated in the house. Why? Like, why didn't Mary go with Martha to meet Jesus? Well, the scriptures don't really tell us everything that was going on with Mary in that moment. But it does tell us this: Mary was broken. She was broken. Have you ever been in a place where you were so broken that you felt like you couldn't seek the Lord? Like I am so broken right now that I don't even know if I have the strength to get up and take a step towards Jesus. That's where Mary was. But I want you to notice something really important. Even though Mary did not seek Jesus in that moment, Jesus sought Mary. Jesus sought Mary. Martha goes back and she says, the teacher is here and he's asking for you. He's seeking you. He wants you to come to him. Right, Psalm 34:8 tells us this: the Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and he saves the crushed in spirit. Listen, church, even when we don't have the strength to seek God, he is still seeking us. But I want you to notice something else. Jesus didn't go to Mary directly. He used Martha, didn't he? He said, Martha, you go back and get Mary, and you bring her to me. He used Martha to bring her to Jesus. And church, listen, this is why we need each other. Because sometimes we're going to find ourselves just like Mary, where we are so broken, we are so down, we're so disappointed, and maybe in the pits of our despair, where we say, I don't even have the strength to get up and take a step towards Jesus. So listen to me, I need some Marthas in my life that in that moment will come to me in my brokenness and say, Jesus loves you. He hasn't abandoned you. He is here and he is calling to you. Would you go with me to Jesus? We need some Marthas in our lives. So Martha goes and she gets Mary. And they both go back and meet Jesus. And I want you to notice that when they get there, Mary says the exact same thing that Martha said, doesn't she? Exact same words. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Was that a coincidence? No. See, I think what happened is in the 4 days that Lazarus was in the tomb, Mary and Martha, they were having these conversations, right? They were talking to each other in the midst of their disappointment and brokenness, and they must have said over and over, if he just would have been here, if Jesus just would have showed up and been here, if he just would have followed our plan, Lazarus would not have died. And so they both say that exact same thing to Jesus. But I want you to notice that Mary's posture is very different than Martha's. It says that when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet. That's a significant detail because listen, this is a very familiar place for Mary. I told you back in Luke 10, Jesus went and visited them in the house. Martha was busy working. Where was Mary? She was at the feet of Jesus, wasn't she? And Martha came and said, Jesus, tell my sister to get up and help me with the chores. And Jesus says, no. She's chosen what is better. She was listening to, learning from, and worshiping Jesus at his feet. And now here, once again, she's at his feet again. But this time, she's not learning. She's lamenting. She's broken. And in the midst of her brokenness, listen, she does the only thing she knows. She falls down at the feet of Jesus. Friends, let me ask you, where do you go when you're broken? Where do you go when you're broken? Is it to others? Is it to your own ability, your work, your wisdom? Or have you made it a pattern in your life that you fall down at the feet of Jesus? Mary comes to Jesus and she says, listen, this is where I am. I don't have anything else to give. I'm broken, but I still believe. In church, I want you to see this. Before Jesus fixed their problem, he joined them in their pain. He could have just snapped his fingers and said, Lazarus, come on. We're done with the crying. Come on, Lazarus. And Lazarus would have come out of the grave. But But he didn't do that. Before he fixed their problem, he joined them in their pain. It says that he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And then the shortest verse in the Bible, verse 35, says Jesus wept. Why? Like, didn't he know that he was about to raise Lazarus? Yeah, absolutely he did. Then why was he weeping? He was weeping because he was joining them in their pain. He wanted to be present with them in their pain. And listen to me, when we allow our pain to bring us closer to Jesus, our pain is never wasted. In fact, it's often the pain that Jesus wants to use to make us more like him. I love this quote by John Piper. He says, when God lets us be broken, he always puts us back together in a way that looks more like Christ than before. When God lets us be broken, when the pieces are all over the floor, he always puts us back together in a way that looks more like Jesus. And that was certainly true for Mary and Martha. He used their disappointment and their brokenness to bring them closer to him, to make them more like Jesus than they had ever been. But yet some people, they missed it, didn't they? It says in verse 37 that the people that were standing around, even though Jesus is meeting with them in a very intimate way, they say, hey, couldn't the one who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? I want you to notice something. They have the same question that Mary and Martha did, right? Jesus, why didn't you heal him? But they didn't go ask Jesus directly, did they? They were talking amongst themselves. Why didn't Jesus do this? What is he thinking? Why wasn't he here? I mean, he's standing right there. They missed it. They were so focused on their unmet expectation that they missed the miracle in front of them. And that wasn't the resurrection. It was Jesus' compassion in the midst of their pain. And that brings us to our final point, number 4. When we learn to value God's presence over his provision, we can experience the glory of his love in ways that we never could have imagined. Look with me quickly at verse 38. It says, then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave and a stone lay against it. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he's been dead for 4 days. Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said these things, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. See, Jesus was deeply moved, and so now he's ready to meet their need. But Martha, she still didn't understand, right? Jesus says, take away the stone. And Martha's like, what? Why would you do that? Like, he's been dead for 4 days. It's going to stink. And I want you to notice something. Even though she believed, God was doing something that she could not even fathom, right? She didn't even know to ask for that because she was like, never even thought that that would be possible because he wasn't just dead. Listen to me. He was dead. Right? 4 days? Like maybe a day, God, but 4? And so she's like, what are you doing? And he says, hey, just watch and believe. And so Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, and he does it in a way that they could not even imagine. And it says that many of the Jews believed in him that day. But listen to me, church. That never would have happened had Jesus just submitted to their plan. Right? It never would have happened if Jesus would have just said, okay, I'll do what you want me to do. I'll go along with what you think I should do. Listen, sometimes, a lot of the times, the most gracious thing that God can say to us is no. Why? Because when he says no, it means that he has something better planned. And even though we might not understand it, even though we don't see it in the moment, we can trust that, listen, he loves us, that he knows what he's doing, and he is working things out for our good and his glory. So maybe today you're in a moment of need. And I just encourage you to seek Jesus first. Maybe you're wrestling today with some real disappointment. Can I just encourage you to remember that he loves you and that you can take those things to him honestly? Maybe you're here today and you're like, Keith, if I'm being honest, I am broken. Can I just encourage you that God sees you? That even when you're seated in the house and you say, I don't even feel like I have the strength to get up and go to God, he knows right where you are. And he is seeking you. He is pursuing you. Friends, listen to me. More than just providing solutions to our problems, God wants to give us the gift of his presence.
We invite you to join us in person at our campus located at 3100 East Grand Avenue in Hot Springs, Arkansas. If we can pray for you, send us an email at prayer@crossgate.org. Thanks again for listening to our audio podcast.